Greetings and welcome back to the home of the Multiverse Drifters. My name is Withershins, I'm the Game Master for Multiverse Drifters, and today we're going to be talking about DC20, the currently beta testing system from the Dungeon Coach. In its version 0.8 state, I've been going through it, chopping it up, breaking down what I like and don't in anticipation of beginning our campaign, in which we are going to use this rules set, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to discuss some of the things that I'm excited about and some of the things that I'm a little bit worried about. Overall, I do want to begin by saying I couldn't be more hype. There's so much from other game systems that I've played in that is fixed in this system, and so many innovations and intuitive adaptations I think that have been made that I'm really interested to see how they play out at the table. While I was reading through and putting my markers so that I have some reference, all I was doing was making some notes, and I thought that I'd share with you kind of my reasoning and rationale behind why I'm excited to see which things in action and how I'm personally plan on playing them. So to begin, the DC20 Beta 0.8 rules are the rule set that I'm currently using. The PDF is available for purchase and will update as additional versions of the beta test are released. 0.9 is not out yet, or not available to me yet, so I am orienting towards the 0.8. I've heard some of the anticipated changes for 0.9. They all sound amazing, but there's a lot of reasons associated with that why we're not going too deep into class-specific things or the mechanics of how each specific class does stuff, because there's a lot of changes there, obviously. So my initial thought and feeling in reviewing this came with the advent of the prime modifier as a key concept. I love the flexibility that's generated by having a single stat, whichever stat you choose to have as the highest, being the most used and most primary of the skills that you've taken. There's a little sidebar here note that I'd like to read, and it says, the prime modifier allows you to create the kind of character you truly want to play without negatively impacting their combat prowess. Since your prime modifier will be used to swing weapons and cast spells, this allows you to choose which attribute you want to be the highest without being forced into pick a specific one. I think that this unlocks all flavors of all characters for all classes. They specifically mention an intelligent or charismatic barbarian, which may not have as much health or be able to grapple or lift as much as a might barbarian, but their ability to wield a weapon is the same. And additionally, in comparison to that might barbarian, an intelligence or charisma-based barbarian would be representative of different archetypes and different flavors of character. I think there are entire realms of character expression that are unlocked with this sort of a concept. It's really great. My note here is that flexibility in stat distribution and allows for the flexibility in character mechanisms and creating really the class fantasy that you're interested in playing. Number 2, for stats. When you reduce the number of stats, you increase the importance of all of them. The positive importance in their impact in doing the things that you want to do, and also the negative impact of having a -2, a -1, or a 0 when attempting to do things. When you're leaning on a lower number of stats, more often their impact is increased. And that's great. That has me very excited to see how the checks and the interactions of the characters in the game that we're going to be playing are impacted by these skills and how they use those to create their characters. Number 3, awareness. Awareness in DC20 is the equivalent of perception in other systems, and it is your prime modifier. Everybody gets a +3 to start, and I think that does a lot towards encouraging everybody to be involved in all stages of the 3 pillars. You know, we talk about that exploration pillar a lot, and often characters with survival skills finally got to use them. Characters with high wisdom finally felt like they got something to do with their wisdom score. But I think this really creates an opportunity for different characters to be leaning on different senses in engaging with the exploration pillar. Number 4, I'm very interested in Death's Door. Please unlock dramatic moments. If there's a mechanic that's ever been set up for the gasping, please no one last moment sort of a scenario. It's the death's door mechanic. I'm a little bit worried that the threshold for it, which the death's door mechanic is, I'll just read this very briefly. When you're reduced to 0 HP or lower, you suffer the following effects. You become exhausted, so you immediately gain 1 level of exhaustion. Action point limit. You can't spend any more than 1 AP, 1 action point until the end of your next turn. You can't concentrate. You fall unconscious until you're restored to 1 HP. And if there's a critical success on the check at the death save, you're restored to 1 HP. So a lot like immediately making death saves in other systems, but you're still having a turn each turn in which you can be present, interact, be moving something away. There's so many elements going on there. The death's door sidebar is also interesting. When a PC is reduced to 0 HP, they're on death's door and fighting for their life. This is represented however the player wants to describe this state looking for them. They are not unconscious. They're in a heavily weakened state, about to die. So if something isn't done soon, they're going to die. They could be prone. They could be trying their best to get away. They could be leaning in extra hard to continue to keep the attention of the enemy on themselves. The next area that I had mentioned was related to dynamic attack saves, and that is page 27. Dynamic attack saves. So for physical attacks, for magical attacks, if something is doing damage and something is requiring a save, whether it's a maneuver that's being done by a champion, or if it's a spell that's being cast, you roll both at the same time. One roll for the attack, the saving party rolls at the same time the save. Done and done. And I think that also the ability for the attack to miss and the save effect to still be successful is really interesting. And really also plays into the flavor of the situations. If I'm not directly taking damage from a blast of cold, but I've still been impaired in my ability to move, it's going to make sense that there's no damage, but I still have some effect, some impact. Number 6 is an area that I have some questions about implementation, but I think it's going to be exciting. I love the idea of it, and that's damage reduction. I like that it's broken down in the ability to have specific types of damage reduction. I mean, this is a feature we've seen from Rage before, having incoming damage, but to directly call it damage reduction and do it by a set number of points, I think is very interesting. Creating the idea of like magical bubbles, or the thick padding of armor, or the incredibly evasive movements that would help you to mitigate damage. I think it's fantastic. I'm curious as to whether it's going to slow down the counting and increase the math of it all, but I guess we'll see. The 7th idea that really stood out to me was stacking advantage and disadvantage. I like the idea of the more advantage you have, the more rolls you're gonna have. We all like the dice, and it feels like a bit of a reward, a bit of something that you've set up to actually have more dice in hand to throw. And as an actual measure of difficulty, those stacks of dice of disadvantage when we're attempting to do something difficult or something under pressure. The narrative function of adding stacks of disadvantage and advantage based on situations that aren't just going to, okay, we've canceled out one time and now it's a straight roll, I think is really great. So we're going to see how that works at the table. I'm excited to see the impact of the game and how I'm able to interact with that as the game master. And for the players, this encourages so much interaction. If there's a high pressure moment, you just imagine the slow kind of epic feeling of good combat slowing even further around these high stakes moments where people are additionally adding help dice and lending in reactions to increase the advantage. So I think that, like I said, there's a lot of potential with that system specifically. The 8th thing that I'd noticed is the formalized crit successes and critical failures. This is something some tables have done for a long time. Some people haven't. Having critical successes on 20s and critical fails on 1s really unlocks the ability for anything to happen in a game. So as the game master, double, triple, quadruple be sure that you aren't allowing rolls for things that you don't want outcomes to occur for. That's going to be an area where I'm going to need to discipline myself and look forward to some insanity. Number 9 is the multiple check penalty. I thought that that is well reasoned, and it also encourages a player or group of players to be approaching a problem from different angles, from different perspectives when trying to solve it. Keeps the game fun, makes sure that a different array of skills are getting used, and that we're creatively solving problems. Number 10, degrees of success and failure in the generation of the difficulty categories and the resolution of the check creates opportunities to always be giving additional informations and rewards and imposing additional consequences and taking things away. So we're going to be using the gentle push and pull of these degrees of success and failure in the game, and I look forward to seeing where that takes us as well. So number 11, in DC20, the damage of the weapon is not rolled for additionally. So you rolled a hit, and the amount of damage that you're doing is then calculated based on the roll. And then all of the bonuses that you have, which are also static numbers, with the exception of things like a help dice that would be added with the roll. But all of this stuff is added after you're rolling a single time. So I think there's going to be a lot more of a barrier to entry at the start, with everybody getting used to what is it that I'm adding onto my rolls and at what level and where was this at on my sheet. But I expect that after a couple of times of playing, there's going to be a lot more comfortability, and it's going to increase the speed of the gameplay tremendously, I assume. Number 12, I really enjoyed the damage types, and I don't know if I've just never looked too closely at other systems, how many there were, and if there are possible interactions there. There are 13 different damage types in DC20. I know that the damage types exist in other games and in all systems, likely, but I thought that the addition of true damage as a specific type of damage, indicating that it can't be reduced by any means, I think is fantastic. The list of damage types that I'm looking at consists of slashing, piercing, bludgeoning, fire, lightning, cold, sonic damage, which I think is cool, poison, corrosion, radiant, umbral, psychic, and true. Might this change? Maybe. I think that there are really interesting opportunities within these damage types, which are subdivided into 3 further damage type categories. Physical damage, elemental damage, and mystical damage really allows for interaction in the character reactions that they're taking to attacks and to being attacked, for things like elemental damage interacting with each other, fire interacting with water, and psychic interacting with radiant or umbral, which knocks right on the door of the next thing that I thought was really interesting, which is the spell duels. The concept is amazing. Let's get rid of counterspell as an official spell. Let's get rid of spells that have barbs in their name that only require the expenditure of a low-level resource to interact in a disruptive way for the DM, for the players. And let's make it cost something, and let's make it contribute to the story. Often it felt like a break on the track of progress in playing the game, and I think that this does a lot to addressing that, and looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to seeing that in game. Action points is the 14th point that I'd highlighted as something that I'm interested in. Action points return at the end of a turn. You get 4 of them every round of combat. So you've got the opportunity to not only dump all 4 of these in your turn, trying to be as effective and strategic as possible in helping your team accomplish their goals, but then the players are left in the situation of holding on to this resource the entire time that it's not yet their turn. And could I react? Do I have the opportunity here to do something interesting? Narratively, strategically, mechanically engaging and interesting. The 15th thing that I'm interested in is the wild magic table. As a result of spell duels, when the same result is rolled, there's a roll on what's called the wild magic table for each player, and the results aren't long term, but they're heavy impact, and some of them are positive. I think looking over them briefly, half of them are positive, half of them are negative, and the dynamic of it being the wild magic table is also something that I'm extremely interested in. It's divided into 20 different options that result from chaotic uses of magic, such as in a spell duel, when both parties roll the same number, each of them roll on this table. Unexpected things happen. Crazy interactions. I also see in this the opportunity for homebrew to fit the setting. You know, if it's an especially cold setting, maybe some of the benefits would be warm related. You know, if it's a mystical or an especially dark campaign, the results of the wild magic table would also be flavored to fit that setting. So many options available. Very cool. Martial maneuvers and techniques are another thing that I'm very interested in with this system. It feels like everybody else who's reacted to this content has spoken about the martial maneuvers and the techniques and the abilities that this gives to martial classes that I think, and that it seems like a shared consensus, is the flavor and adjustment and presence that at high levels was kind of reserved for spellcasters. So I think it's fantastic, and I look forward to seeing these at the table. Initiative, I think there are so many ways to run initiative. We've tried them at our tables many, many different ways. The system outlined in DC20 is that the players describe what's happening as initiative is rolled, how they're interacting with the scene, and roll that skill, roll that ability. I think that's really great for the storytelling. And then the intention is that the players and the enemies are staggered in an alternating format as combat continues. I think that's also strategically really interesting, because one thing to consider is that in this initiative order, players and enemies have the ability to hold to be placed in a different position within the initiative order, enabling combined turns, enabling comboed magical attacks and abilities. It's fantastic. I'm not necessarily skeptical of it. I just worry a little bit at the passing it back and forth kind of element. So look forward to see it. 18, the vision rules. I feel like vision has been clarified pretty well in other systems, but as I was reading this description in the DC20 beta, it felt very clear to me, and it also felt like something that could be explained to new players, that 10 feet outside of dim light is darkness. You know, that vision extends to measured amounts. I really like the idea of, and I think it feels, the vision rules in DC20 feel very tangible, and I like that about them. Another thing that I noticed were the dynamic elements of combat. Kind of additional rules for movement and interactions in battles that isn't well articulated at all in other systems, or again, maybe I haven't been present for the clear articulation of them. Things like collision damage, falling attacks, throwing rules, deliberately falling versus not deliberately falling. Awesome. And again, a tremendous resource in the hands of creative and disruptive players. So we'll see how this gets implemented. Another thing that I'm really looking forward to is that weapons have styles and properties. So the styles are locked behind mastery. If you're not skilled with a weapon, you're not going to be able to use these styles. That makes sense. And also, the properties of a weapon are immutable. They belong to the weapon, but they're chosen by the player. So these are things that are going to dynamically affect the way that you're playing with this specific weapon in a way that feels genuine to you in the use and progress and story of your character. And the final thing that I wanted to talk about was by the fives. We talked a little bit about this in difficulty categories, and we talked a little bit about it in flavoring outcomes of skills checks. It feels very oriented to narrative structure and moving the story forward, allowing successes to be a little bit more successful or a little bit more challenging. Really does a lot to kind of telling the game that each table is trying to tell. This was just a very short overview of what I'm interested in the system. I hope that some of this has been helpful. I do want you to know I'm going to be doing this again when the 0.9 rules come out. In addition, as we're playing our games going forward, I'd love feedback and the way that you guys see the feeling of the narrative being impacted by some of the rules that we've talked about today. But for now, thanks for your time. Give us that like, give us that subscribe, and see you next time.